When people see their elders getting vaccinated, they say to themselves, well, I'm a 25-year-old, and if my grandmother can do it, I can do it.
Tonight, Indigenous services on the vaccine rollout in First Nations.
This is one of the biggest human rights issues that we could be fighting to today.
And Quebec's new curfew raises more concerns for homeless advocates. Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen. We begin tonight in Ottawa, where Indigenous Services Minister Marc Miller gave an update today on the COVID-19 vaccination rollouts. He confirmed more money for Indigenous communities to help fight the pandemic, as well as addressing the hesitancy of some to get the COVID-19 vaccine at all. Jamie Pashkumskum reports.
Marc Miller says it's crucial to stay on top of the second wave as it makes its way into First Nations across the country.
We've seen recent outbreaks in remote and isolated communities and recent increases in cases that are both alarming and concerning. We must anticipate and prepare for more in the coming weeks and months.
And you can say Miller's putting his money where his mouth is. Wednesday, Indigenous Services announced $1.2 billion in extra funding for Indigenous communities, over $600 million for public medical health responses, and nearly $400 million for community support,
so that they can tailor their own responses. And it's been wildly successful in ensuring that communities can actually implement, for example, perimeter security, for example, their own on-the-land initiatives.
Miller also announced $180 million for long-term care facilities. In the press conference, Indigenous Services says they would like to have Indigenous communities in the territories fully vaccinated by the end of March. But following incidences of systemic racism, like the treatment of Joyce Echaquan in a hospital in Joliet, Quebec, Miller acknowledges that some may be skeptical to the healthcare system and getting vaccinated.
What we've seen in some communities is really good uptake. Starting with the elders, and when people see their elders getting vaccinated, they say to themselves, well, I'm a 25-year-old, and if my grandmother can do it, I can do it.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau wants the entire population of Canada vaccinated by September, but Indigenous Services say they don't have a specific target date. They continue to prioritize northern remote communities, but southern First Nations have options.
Pfizer is obviously an option for closer communities. I think it's an option that's been offered to Six Nations, offered to Akwesasne, among others, because of the closer proximities.
Jamie Pashkumskum, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Over the weekend, Quebec cracked down with an 8 p.m. curfew. Just days into the change, those who advocate for the homeless in Montreal are trying to put out multiple fires, such as housing, ticketing, and addiction issues, all while the urban Indigenous community faces its first real outbreak of the pandemic. Lindsay Richardson explains.
It took one curfew-related comment from the Premier to set eyes rolling in Montreal.
Ce qu'on souhaite, évidemment, en plus avec le froid, on souhaite qu'il soit à l'intérieur, puis assez de place de disponible.
On the ground, those advocating for the homeless during the pandemic say Legault is wrong.
This is one of the biggest human rights issues that we could be fighting to today.
It's a full-scale outbreak here, with dozens of cases of COVID-19 in the urban Indigenous community alone. Isolation space is hard to come by. Shelters are operating with reduced capacity, and the government said police would be lenient with the homeless.
Hello, you've reached Constable Raphael Bergeron from the Media Relations Section of the Montreal Police.
But over the weekend, Montreal police issued a $1,500 ticket to a man out past 8, prompting this demonstration.
When you actually present more policing, what ends up happening is that people don't want to get tested. Like, I had some people tell me, I'm not going to go get tested because now they're going to go after me to go quarantine and I have nowhere to live.
The mayor's office says they'll deploy necessary means to support organizations. Nakaset, with the Native Women's Shelter of Montreal, has some ideas.
She can declare a state of emergency for the homeless population. She did it in March. We could have so many more resources available. We can have the Army come and pitch tents, or the Red Cross pitch tents, and have it warm.
Projet Autochtone du Québec, an overnight shelter for Indigenous people, started their own testing clinic. 60% of tests came back positive. Heather Johnston says the list of pandemic needs is long.
Making sure, we've got plexiglass out, we've got proper cleaning protocols, that we have all the PPE we need. one of the things at the moment that money cannot buy in Montreal in the community sector is staff, right? And every organization is running on the skeleton staff and trying to keep services open and trying to provide good services that meet people's needs.
Organizations like Projet Autochtone are trying hard to make it work and burning out in the process.
There's a system that doesn't always work, but the humans behind that system, I have not met someone in the health network or the public health that has appeared to me to be indifferent or uncaring as human beings. But the system often does. A lot of people have fallen through the cracks.
But specific questions remain. Can we make more space? Will the homeless be prioritized for the vaccine? Keanu says there's already one takeaway.
I'd just like people to understand that if you or your family wouldn't go and stay at the shelter, we shouldn't be having those shelters. Like, it's just really, really simple. If there's a real lack of dignity and respect the way people are treated.
Lindsay Richardson, APTN National News, Montreal.
As the retrial continues for Bradley Barton in the death of Cindy Gladue, family and supporters gathered outside the Edmonton Law Courts this morning. A small, socially distanced crowd held a memorial for Cindy Gladue with honor songs and prayer. The event was broadcast on Facebook Live. The speaker talked about discrimination towards Indigenous people in the court system.
Why do we not matter to the court system? Why do we not matter to the justice system? Why do we not matter to the children's services system? This has to stop. My heart is breaking. There's too many of us disappearing.
On Tuesday, Anishinaabe music icon Curtis Johnny, better known as Shingoose, died of COVID-19. He's originally from the Roseau River Anishinaabe First Nation in southern Manitoba.
If I close my eyes and shut them very tight.
Johnny became popular in the late 1960s and early 1970s, performing with several rock and blues groups in the United States. He worked with the Rolling Stones and the Beatles, among others. He released numerous albums and eventually came out with a solo effort that featured collaborative work with Bruce Cockburn. Johnny returned to Winnipeg in 1973 and turned his focus to activism on Indigenous issues. He was also part of the effort that led to the creation of a Juno Award celebrating Indigenous artists. In 2012, Johnny was inducted to the Manitoba Music Hall of Fame. Curtis Johnny was 74 years old. We've got to take a quick break, but still ahead, we talk to Indigenous about a story they broke involving birth alerts in BC. Stay with us. Welcome back. We go to British Columbia now, where an investigation by journalists at the online publication Indigenous shows that the province was warned that using birth alerts to apprehend infants was both illegal and unconstitutional months before the government announced they were ending the practice. A birth alert or a hospital alert is used when a social worker feels an expectant parent may put their newborn at risk. It's a practice that affects Indigenous parents at a greater degree than others. Bailey Morrell and Anna McKenzie are two of the reporters who broke this story, and they join me now. Well, first of all, to you both, brilliant work. I was so impressed and happy to read that story. I wish more journalists would jump into the cesspool that are the issues surrounding child welfare. I'll start with you, Anna. So if you could just explain what happens when a social worker calls the hospital for a birth alert.
Yeah, so thanks so much for having us, first of all. So we know once an expectant parent is flagged, the hospital will alert the social worker team once the baby's been born. And in BC, we also know that almost 30% of the time the infant is apprehended. Mm-hmm. Now, this is really concerning because it breaches the parent's privacy, as personal information is shared without their consent between these two large social service bodies, healthcare and child welfare services. Mm-hmm. And through this, we also know that Indigenous children, youth, and families are grossly overrepresented in all facets of the child welfare system. So it actually came to no surprise that 2018, 2019, of the birth alerts that were issued, 58% of them were issued towards Indigenous families. So the practice of birth alerts, of course, ended in September 2019, but still occur elsewhere in Canada, with one of the most recent cases happening in Brandon, Manitoba over the Christmas holidays.
Yeah, I did that story. And I would also say that not only does it lead to oftentimes apprehension when there's a birth alert tagged to your file, but oftentimes it's flimsy apprehensions, right? It's on flimsy grounds that it's just like on paper, this looks like it's the case and that's good enough for us to take kids, and then good luck getting your kids back. Bailey, my next question would be to you. You know, government lawyers in BC had told the Ministry of Children and Family Development that it was illegal and unconstitutional and it was a risk of litigation, these birth alerts. How did the province respond?
Yeah, so we're aware of a memo. We don't have the memo, but we're aware of one that was sent on May 6th in 2019 that said birth alerts were illegal and unconstitutional in British Columbia. But the ministry didn't actually end the practice until September of that year. So there's a months-long gap. And they've moved now to what they call a voluntary support model, which is something that Anna actually will be following up on to give more detail to in the coming days. To our knowledge, it was also confirmed with the MCFD by BC's Privacy Commissioner that birth alerts go against BC's Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. So they're like doubly not legal, if that makes sense. Yep. However, under that act, they are also not obligated to tell anyone if they've previously violated their privacy. It's up to their discretion. So MCFD has actually told us that their focus has been forward-looking. That's what they've said to us in an email statement. So essentially, they haven't told any of these parents that they violated their privacy, or not, at least not the bulk of them, from our knowledge.
Anna, why should parents be concerned about what's going on?
Well, frankly, it's a privacy issue. Parents should be concerned about how their information is being used once they've been flagged. Also, this is tangible proof that the BC government was aware that what they were doing was wrong, and it's, in my opinion, a continuation of the legacy of taking Indigenous children away from our respective families and communities. And families that have been impacted need to know that this is going on. The broader public needs to know that this is going on because this is a human rights issue. So really everyone should be concerned, not just parents.
Yeah, and you know, what are advocates saying about this when you pose this to them? Like, what's been going on? And like, as you had said too, this isn't just in BC. I mean, your story is focused on BC, but these birth alerts happen all over the place. This is contrary to the Missing Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls National Inquiry. They specified like these things need to stop. Child welfare is causing so much, inflicting so much harm on women, taking their kids, and then women spiral and they end up in situations that then they from there end up missing or dead. So I'm curious, back to you, and what are advocates saying about as this is all kind of being revealed?
Well, our team at Indigenous, we were sitting on this information for a little while before we published the story, so it's been really interesting to see it sort of catch fire in the community, not just with Indigenous advocates, but non-Indigenous advocates as well. So we had reached out to Mary Ellen Terpelafon, who was really helpful in helping us put together the story. And I'm really excited to see all the other folks that are going to come forward and share their voices and opinions as we work on a number of follow-up stories over the next coming weeks. So we're just at a point right now where I think the information is just really digesting with a lot of folks, and that there's going to be a continuation and some actions that will be coming out of this.
Bailey, in the story, it says that a government lawyer wanted you to give back the information. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we filed our FOI in October. I feel like I need to give a little timeline to this. We filed in October, and I got our information back on the 9th of December. So we got 66 pages of information, which has actually been published in our story. There's a link. Some of that information had already been redacted due to solicitor-client privilege when I received the initial FOI package, which is something standard. I expected that. We started working on the story, and then when we contacted the Attorney General and the Ministry of Children and Family Development last week, we got a letter from one of their lawyers saying they had released some of this information to us in error that should have been redacted due to the same reasoning. And so it's 4 whole pages that they were hoping to redact. It's not lines, it's just like 4 whole pages that we got in this email. They're like, please don't issue this. We haven't waived solicitor-client privilege, but we had at this point had been working on this story for weeks, and we felt, you know what, this is in the public interest. We need to publish the story because it doesn't seem like information that anyone has, and you know, this potentially has the impact on like thousands of people. So yeah, we kind of were like, yeah, we're going to publish it anyways, because we think that that's what's right.
Anna, I'll give the last question to you. You said that this is something you guys are continuing to work on. What can we expect next from Indigenous on this file? And is your work going to extend to other provinces and territories?
Yeah, so we're working on a story just looking at birth alerts occurring in other provinces and territories. We're looking further into BC, what voluntary supports are being offered. And we're also looking at doing sort of a reflection piece on what that's meant for us in Indigenous to break a story like this and what it's meant for us personally. So just on my end, being an Indigenous mom, being somebody that experienced that very visceral fear while I was in hospital, I really feel strongly that giving that personal reflection will really help with the overall story. And we just want to keep going because birth alerts are still happening in Canada and they need to stop.
Well, I thank both of you for joining us and for this amazing work that you're doing. Keep it up, and we will have you back on next time you break something this incredibly bombshelly, right? Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For more on that story, you can go to Indigenous' Facebook page. Make sure to give them a like and a follow. Or you can go to aptnnews.ca and click on the story that we've posted there. Well, the world has been watching the unrest in the U.S. for more than a week now since rioters stormed and seized the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. On today's In Focus, we talk to our cousins south of the border for an Indigenous perspective on what's happening with America.
I think what we're seeing right now is that people are really seeing a fear around the falling apart of democracy. And so that's why we see people like Liz Cheney on the Republican side and Nancy Pelosi on the Democratic side coming together around the same narrative of needing to save our democracy and really stand by our Constitution. And so I think that that's what really is going to save us from this, real overt and scary violence that we're seeing happening right now is a shared narrative around democracy and needing to save our Constitution. But we do need to recognize that, binding ourselves to the settler state and beneath it is something that is going to be dangerous for us in the future.
The way it played out, I'm also happy I wasn't there. But it was very surprising and just appalling to see what was going on from my television set. And I think I went straight to social media, and a lot of Indigenous people were quick to really point out the juxtaposition between the violent mob that was happening last week versus the peaceful Standing Rock water defenders, and the use of force between these two events that happening. And people were just, wondering why Capitol Police, didn't do more, or National Guard or the D.C. Police versus, in Standing Rock, a lot of the water defenders were met with mace, police beatings, rubber bullets, and water cannons that were, at them in freezing temperatures. And so I think it was just very surprising. I just couldn't believe this was the, America that we're living in, too.
I want America to hear that this system is not working. This is all indication that this system has failed us on so many levels, from white supremacy to the response to COVID to the response to the environment. We need systems change now, and we need a just transition to real justice. We need to move away from these systems that are oppressing Black, Indigenous, people of color, and laborers, and we need to make sure that we have a system, regenerative economies, that will work not just for us, but for the environment and for future generations to come.
And exactly 1 week after rioters stormed the Capitol building, the U.S. president has been impeached. The unprecedented vote is in the U.S. House of Representatives. It's the first step in a process that could see Donald Trump removed and potentially banned from ever holding federal office again.
Pennsylvania, where the state Supreme Court just unilaterally extended the election to Friday. Pennsylvania, where the Secretary of State unilaterally changed the rules.
Proceedings in the House of Representatives kicked off this morning. Democrats accused the president of, quote, inciting violence against the government. Unlike the first impeachment, 10 Republicans voted, along with the Democrats, to allow the process to proceed. 231 representatives voted yes to impeachment, and 197 voted no to impeach. Time for us to take another break, but when we come back, we've got your photo of the day, tomorrow's weather, and the first baby orca of the year off the coast of BC gets a Kwakwala name. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. This one comes to us from Ernie Turner. He calls this the bed of the Old Saskatchewan River at Grand Rapids. Thanks for this beauty shot, Ernie. You can send us your photos. Email them to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be featured on our next photo of the day. Well, now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting off on the East Coast, we got 1 in snow for St. John's, 3 in snow for Halifax. -12 in snow for Inukjuak, Le Grand River -5, mix of sun and cloud. Sept-Îles snowing and -2 degrees, 1 in some snow for Montreal. Ottawa 1 in snow, North Bay 1 with a mix of sun and cloud, same with Sault Ste. Marie. Sioux Lookout -1 in snow, Kapuskasing and Timmins 0. -2 in snow for Norway House, Puckatawagan and Thompson both -13 in snow. 0 in snow for Winnipeg, -6 in snow for Brandon. Saskatoon -3 in snow, mix of sun and cloud -2 for Regina and Estevan. Buffalo Narrows -3 and snow, Uranium City -9 and snow. Fort Chip -6 and snow, sunshine and -3 for Grand Prairie. Sunny and 0 for Edmonton, sunshine and 3 for Lethbridge. 2 and sunny for Kamloops, 0 and sunshine for Quesnel. 0 and snow for Smithers, -5 in Dease Lake and snowing there. -19 and sunny skies for Beaver Creek, Whitehorse -5 and snow. Wauhee -15 and some snow expected, -22 and sunshine for Norman Wells. Paulatuck snow -24, Sax Harbor -27 in snow. Baker Lake and Chesterfield and Whale Cove all sunny skies -25. Igloolik -22 and snow. Pangertung -18 with a mix of sun and cloud. The first baby orca of the year in BC has a name. This is Nanakwa, which is a Kwakwala term meaning to return home. Researchers spotted the new whale hopping alongside its mother near Port Hardy. It was born to an orca named Midsummer, who has 2 other children. The well-documented orca pod spends a lot of time in and around the North Island. Well, we are all out of time. That's your APTN National News for this Wednesday. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great night.
Find like local websites and stuff.